Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of the mini-series on how to create YouTube content. So in episode 1, what we talked about was organizing your music to make life easier for you when you actually start creating content. In this episode, we're going to talk about actually creating the content itself. So we're going to be using Adobe Premiere Pro, and we're also going to be using Adobe Audition. My goal for this video is not to train you on every single feature that I'm going to use. What I want to do is I want to make a summary of everything that I'm going to teach, and then subsequent videos or episodes I can go in depth into them. I just don't want to create a giant video. I just want to keep it around 10, maybe 20 minutes to make it, easily viewable in a single session, and then I can break out any of the details into smaller videos in which some of them you'll probably get right away and never watch again. Some of the other ones you might want to rewatch just to get ideas from them. So that's the plan. So this one is just going to be very brief. It's not going to be technical, and then maybe you can get an idea of what you want to do if you already know how to use Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe Audition. But before we get into that, couple of things that you do want to do before jumping right into it. Generally speaking, when I'm about to make a video, I go through all of the clips that I've shot for this video. So in this case, I'm going to use the example of a vlog that I just did, which is me visiting the Cincinnati Zoo. When I went to go ahead and visit the Cincinnati Zoo, I shot a lot of clips. There's probably over 50 gigabytes of video and pictures all intermingled in there. So the first thing what we want to do is we just want to download it to our computers, and we just want to do a quick pass of all the videos that we might want to use and delete any of them that we don't want to use. This is going to save us a bunch of time in Premiere Pro. So we went ahead and started Adobe Premiere Pro. So one of the things that I'm going to do really quickly is kind of show you around in case you've never actually used Adobe Premiere Pro. This isn't exactly a tutorial to actually use Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm just going to go over the highlights. If you want to know more, that's definitely for a different video on YouTube. There are plenty out there that can kind of show you around more in depth, but I'm just going to show you the basics so that you know how to move around and understand this video if it's your first time. Over on the lower left, it says project, and the title of this one I just used as demo. I just created another one just to make things easier. This is where you're going to drag all of your video files. You can drag and drop in there, and once they're in there, they're going to be buffered, and then you can use them on your timeline. The timeline is the big panel to the right. This is where you're going to actually build your video. So anything you drag onto the timeline is what's going to get created once you export your video. So your timeline is very important. In the upper left, this is where you do all of your effects, and this is where you see all of your metadata for your video clips. The biggest one here is in the effects control tab. When you highlight a video, there's going to be certain things that you're going to be able to do to that video. That's going to be mostly displayed here. Program, on this side, this is where you're going to actually see the video playing on your timeline. So this is going to show the end result when you actually export it. So also very important. Things that we won't be getting into but are also very important: essential graphics. I'm just not going to go into that for this particular video. And the color correction. Those are things that are probably going to be for a later video, just because I really don't want to have a very long video for this. I might have to break it up into multiple clips. But that's just a quick look at kind of the display that you're going to be working with. So once you have all the video clips that you want to use, and you might bring in more or you might remove them later because you don't need all of them. A lot of times I'll actually bring in more video clips than I actually use. That's kind of normal. So I'll just drag them all in, and then I'll just pick and choose which one based on the story that's unfolding as I build my timeline. So go ahead and just drag all those video clips into your project box and then allow them to import in. It usually takes a little bit of time. Just wait for it, be patient. Once they're there, they're going to be accessible. You can drag them straight into your timeline. The first video in your timeline is actually super important. This is something you need to know, is that that first clip will set the settings, the video settings of your actual video. So if you have a 4K clip and you have a 1080p clip, depending on what you want to export as, that's the first clip you want to drag in, even if it's not the first video clip that's going to start your story. If you want to actually export in 4K, go ahead and drag a 4K clip onto the timeline because it will take those settings. If you're going to drag a 1080p clip, then drag that one into your timeline before dragging a 4K clip, and then you can scale the 4K clip down appropriately. It just makes life so much easier if you do that. Otherwise, you're going to have to fiddle with some settings and then make it all fit, and that's just no fun. So the first video in your timeline, I usually have it as an intro clip, so that's 5 seconds of me, showing something interesting. Maybe it's a time lapse, maybe it's showing the location where I'm actually going to be shooting most of the video, but it's just a short 5-second clip. It might be with some music and then some text to show you what's going on in that video. After that, I probably go straight into the meat of the video. Once I go into the meat of the video, it depends on how it starts. Like, for example, if I start the video in this room and then I'm talking to you, what I'll go ahead and do as soon as I drag that video into the timeline, I'll go ahead and start editing the audio. And editing the audio is quite simple. You just highlight your clip, you right click, and then what you'll see is edit clip in Adobe Audition on the top half of the menu, the pop-up menu that shows up. What that's going to do, it's going to export that sound into Adobe Audition. The two basic things that you want to do in Adobe Audition is, one, normalize the sound in terms of loudness. This makes it so that when you go in between clips, there's not going to be a perceived loudness. You don't really want somebody watching to be straining to hear something and then all of a sudden another clip is super loud. That's going to be very annoying. Now, there is some creativity involved in terms of when you actually want it to be whisper quiet and when you want it to be normally loud, but that's up to you as a creator. What I would normally generally say is, in a vlog video, you kind of want to normalize all sound so that it just sounds good across the board. That's the first thing you should do once you drag a video clip onto the timeline. It's also actually important to note that when you start recording the video, I would highly recommend you record about 3 seconds of dead air. So you start your video and you don't say anything, or you just let the recording go for about 3 seconds, because you can apply noise reduction significantly easier if you have just ambient noise or the noise floor. In this case, like if I'm in this room, if I'm just being quiet, I can hear the noise floor of the room and also the mic, and then I can use that to actually remove the background noise. So that's super important. There's actually 2 ways to remove noise, and each one of them has their specific pros and cons. Adaptive noise reduction, I would highly recommend it if you're in a room where you can actually control the background noise. Like, for example, being in this room, there is no ambient noise that I can't control. So it's going to be very consistent background noise. In this case, using the adaptive noise reduction does an amazing job. Even if an air conditioner kicks on, it can really adapt to it and make it sound awesome. Now, if you're outside and there's a lot of ambient talking in the back, or there's, animals chirping or stuff like that, using adaptive noise reduction is not a good idea, because it's going to distort some sounds that it thinks is actually background noise that you want to remove. In this case, what you want to do is you want to selectively select the noise you want to remove and then apply it. That's going to be a little bit more complicated, and we'll cover that in depth in a different video, but I just want you to understand there's 2 ways to remove noise, and they're both important because they can be used in different ways. Now, generally speaking, when I do my vlog videos for YouTube, I'll have a part where I'm talking, and then I'll move into a cinematic or a montage or some sort of part where it's really going to move time or show what's going on for the day. That's something that's, I think, everybody likes to do, because it's kind of boring watching somebody talk for the entire vlog. So what you want to do is you want to see the action that's going on. So for example, for me, I'm going to a zoo. I'm going to go ahead and do a slow motion montage of all of the animals and the places that we're walking to, so that you can kind of get a sense for what I was doing for the entire day. There's going to be some creativity involved, but there is some things that you want to do. The first thing I would want to say is, when you do a montage, definitely have in mind what you want to actually use for a montage. But when you put it onto the timeline and you start cutting them, You want them probably somewhere between like 3 to at most 10 seconds. But when you first cut them together, don't spend a lot of time cutting them to perfection, because you're going to actually change those later. It's the way I do things. So cut them to where you want them to be about right. You know, you show just enough to where you're happy with, and then go ahead and string them together. What I would highly recommend, this is something that I learned over time, is that when you string these clips together, you want each clip to kind of build on the previous clip. So for example, on my first montage of the zoo, it was based all around water. So you saw us walking towards water, you saw the fountain, and then all of the animals involved were actually around or near water or in the water. So that's something that I've slowly started to learn in terms of how you want to build your montages. They want to be similar enough to where, you know, when somebody watches it, they understand that, oh, they're actually related together. A lot of the clips that I actually put together for this particular video, the actual exhibits weren't near each other. There were a few exhibits that were clustered together, and the other water exhibits were a little bit further away. But for the purposes of this video, I actually clustered them together because it just made sense and it just looked good that way. Once you get the montage together, then you want to go ahead and build into like the next vocal part or the next part of your vlog, and then you would just rinse and repeat until you have the entire timeline the way you want it. I generally shoot for about, I don't know, somewhere between 5 minutes to 7 minutes. That's where I like all of my vlogs to be. It's just interesting enough to where I can actually fill it with some detail, but it's short enough to where if anybody's interested, they'll actually watch the whole thing. So that's the target that I shoot for. On average, I think the average watch time for the vlogs, even though it's a short number, is about 3 minutes. So I try to double the amount of minutes so that, you know, I get a decent watch time on YouTube, because 3 minutes is actually too short for a video. You just can't get anything done. So I try to get around 7 minutes. Sometimes it's shorter depending on the vlog, just because there's not much to show and I do want to create a video for that day. That does happen. So take it with a grain of salt if you see some short videos, because that's all I had to show for that day. So at this point, what you should have is your basic vlog layout completely laid out. So you should have your entire story laid out. You have your introduction, you have your speaking bits, you have your montages and your cinematic bits kind of binding all of the story together. And then you would have some sort of ending. Like the ending could be something fun. In this case, I was walking to my van, and then you would end with the 20-second end clip in which you can put your subscriber icon and then other videos that other people might be interested in watching. So once that's done, what you're going to want to look at next is you want to play the entire timeline. So you want to play the entire video, and what you want to be looking for this time around is the type of transitions between video clips. Right now we haven't talked about any transitions, so this is the time to look at it. So you're going to go ahead and continue to replay that video, trying to find bits where it just didn't sound right and you had to cut off some bits, or if it did sound right and you like it exactly the way it is. Sometimes in order to transition between clips, you actually want to add a transition effect. We're going to talk in depth about those in a different video, but you can actually get to those in the effects tab and you can look at them as the transitions. I wouldn't overuse those too much, but they're definitely very handy, and I do use those every once in a while. Once you actually have time to actually play with all of the transitions, don't try to go overboard, because you can spend just a ton of time there and it's just not worth it for one transition. Most people are pretty used to watching a hard cut over, so long as it's good. But yeah, that's something that you're just going to have to work through. If in the end you can't figure it out, a transition with a cross dissolve almost always will look better than having nothing. So that's something to think about. Once you have all of your transitions laid out and you like them the way it is, the next thing to go look at is music. So music is one of the most important things in your vlog, and you definitely need to spend a lot of time looking at the music. So what I would recommend is having that music library, which I hope you have put together from the first video, and then you start thinking about how you want to lay out your music. Generally speaking, when I'm creating my vlogs, the first 5 seconds, I already have an idea of what type of music I want for those first 5 seconds, and then to end it, Again, in the effects category, you can actually do a fade of the audio, which is something that I really like using. That's definitely one thing that I almost always use, is to fade out the audio, because that's super important. Now, when it comes to your montages and your cinematic clips, the reason why I say don't spend too much time when you're actually editing those together is because when you select the music for your montages, once you overlay the music to your videos, what you want to do is you want to look for peaks in the music, and that's going to be where you want to do your hard transitions. This is the reason why I don't tell you to spend so much time making the clips perfect, because you're going to end up altering it to the music. Because you are not actually paying for the music, in many cases you would rather have a imperfect clip as long as it syncs to the audio. Because we watch so much TV, YouTube, movies, we're used to actually seeing hard transitions of video when it hits a certain beat or a certain peak beat. So that's where we want to see our hard transitions. So it's important to look at the audio files, see where the peaks are, and then make the hard transitions there. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead and just play through it and see how well and how smoothly it plays through. A lot of good music, they're going to have really peak beats throughout the entire music, so they should be pretty easy to find. And what you'll see is that once you do that, your transitions will be much better, because we're just conditioned from watching so much television, whether it's on the internet or on TV or in the theaters, to look for those when we hear those peak beats. That is by far the most important thing to look for when you're doing your hard cuts for your montages, is that whatever music you select, you want to look at those beats and make sure that you are hard cutting at the right points. It's also important to note that, if you pick the right music, right? If you pick a very mellow music, like for example classical music, it might be a little bit harder to actually find those peak beats because they might be very far in between. So it is important sometimes to actually choose the right music. I have gone through videos in which I picked a piece of music and it just didn't fit. Even though I liked the clip itself, the music clip, I actually deleted it and opted for an easier one just because it just didn't fit. The last thing I want to talk about is using still images in your vlogs. And using still images is perfectly fine. But what you want to do when you use still images is you want to add a little motion to them. You'll notice that in my vlogs, if I do show a still image, they're actually either zooming in or zooming out. That little bit of motions just makes it so much more interesting. And that's something that you're going to have to do. It's actually a very easy step, but I will make a video on that if you don't know how to use it. It's something in the effects controls. You can probably see it in the video. And definitely look for that. But I would highly recommend, if you do any still images, to make sure that it's always in motion to make it more interesting, and not to have it there for probably more than 5 seconds. So that is a quick summary of everything that I want to talk about. In the next videos that I will be doing, I'll go ahead and break those down into smaller chunks. Hopefully this isn't too long of a video, but I don't actually know until I watch it. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to answer them. I am by no means perfect. I am learning as I go. I just enjoy actually doing this video and showing people my thought process as I go through these video clips, because I have been asked, in person and also over email about how I create them. So this is my thought process, how I do things, and how I'm currently learning. Almost every week I learn something new, or I have something that I know I need to improve on. It's super difficult to improve while maintaining the same level of what you're doing right now, because everything adds length, right? So as I learn more, as I make my vlogs better, it takes longer, which means I need to find ways to make it, which means I need to be able to get more efficient or spend more time with these vlogs. And on a 4 video a week schedule, that's very difficult when you already have a full-time job that you're working more hours in. You want to have a life outside this, you're doing other volunteer things. You really need to compress this down to where it's going to be as efficient as possible, so that when it's crunch time and you need to actually bust out a recording of this video, you can do it very quickly.